My stepmother kicked me out at 18, swearing I'd never amount to anything. 10 years later, at my father's funeral, she walked in draped on the arm of a wealthy developer, only to realize he wasn't just my employee. He was about to lose everything to me. She thought she'd destroyed my family. What she didn't know was that I'd built an empire strong enough to take hers apart, brick by brick, and I wasn't done with her yet. If you are watching this, please hit that like button, subscribe, and mention in the comments where you are watching this from. I would like to know how far my story has reached. My father was dead. After 10 years of silence between us, he was gone, and I felt nothing but a hollow ache where grief should have been. "Miss Chen?" My assistant knocked softly. "The car is ready whenever you are." I folded the paper and slipped it into my jacket pocket. "Thank you, Sarah. Cancel my meetings for the rest of the week." She nodded and quietly left. I sat alone in my corner office, looking out at the city skyline. 10 years ago, I'd been thrown out of my childhood home with nothing but a backpack and $20. Now I owned half the buildings I could see from my window. The irony wasn't lost on me. But none of that mattered today. Today, I had to face her again. The funeral home smelled like lilies and old wood. I arrived early, hoping to pay my respects and leave before the crowds came. My father lay in the casket, looking smaller than I remembered. His face was peaceful, finally free from the stress that had consumed his last years. I placed a single white rose on his chest. "I'm sorry we couldn't fix things," I whispered. Well, well, look who decided to show up. That voice. Like nails on glass, it cut through my moment of peace. I turned slowly, and there she was. Margaret, my stepmother. She looked older, her blonde hair now silver, but her eyes held the same cold calculation I remembered. "Hello, Margaret." She walked closer, her heels clicking on the polished floor. "I suppose you think you have a right to be here." He was my father. Was he? She laughed, but there was no humor in it. "Funny how you remembered that now that he's dead. Where were you when he needed you? When the business was failing? When he was losing everything?" The business was failing? My father had owned a small construction company. Nothing fancy, but it had always been steady. "What are you talking about?" "Oh, you don't know?" Her smile was cruel. "Of course you don't. You've been too busy playing powerful businesswoman to care about the man who raised you." My hands clenched at my sides. "Get to the point, Margaret. Your father lost everything 3 years ago. The company, the house, his savings. We've been living in a tiny apartment, scraping by on my waitressing job. He died a broken man, Sophie. Broken and forgotten by his only daughter." The words hit me like physical blows. My father had been proud, too proud to ask for help. But if I had known, why didn't he tell me? "Because you burned that bridge when you left. You were so angry, so determined to prove us wrong. Well, congratulations, you proved it. You became successful, while your father lost everything." I wanted to tell her it wasn't that simple, that she had made my life hell for years after she married my father, that she had turned him against me slowly, methodically, until the day she finally convinced him to throw me out. But standing there, looking at my father's body, the words wouldn't come. "The service starts in an hour," she said, turning away. "Try not to make a scene." I stood alone with my father again, but the peace was gone. Margaret had poisoned it, just like she poisoned everything else. The chapel filled slowly. I recognized some faces from my father's old crew, men who had worked construction with him for decades. They nodded at me respectfully, but I could see the questions in their eyes. Where had I been? Why hadn't I helped? Margaret sat in the front row, dabbing at her eyes with a tissue. The grieving widow, playing her part perfectly. A few people offered her condolences, and she accepted them with gracious nods and sad smiles. I took a seat in the back, trying to stay invisible. The service was simple, the way my father would have wanted. The pastor spoke about his dedication to his work, his love for his family. No one mentioned the estranged daughter who had abandoned him. As the service ended, people began to file out. I waited, planning to slip away quietly. But then I heard Margaret's voice, louder than necessary. "Oh, Richard, I'm so glad you could make it." I looked up and froze. A man in an expensive suit was walking toward Margaret, his arms open for an embrace. He was tall, maybe 60, with silver hair and confident eyes. He looked familiar, but I couldn't place him. "I'm so sorry for your loss, sweetheart," he said, holding her tight. David was a good man. "Sweetheart?" I watched as he kissed her cheek, his hand resting possessively on her back. The way they stood together. The easy intimacy. This wasn't just a friend offering comfort. "Thank you for coming," Margaret said. "It means everything to me." "Of course, we'll get through this together." He looked around the room, and his gaze found mine. For a moment, something flickered in his expression. Surprise? Recognition? But it passed quickly. Margaret followed his gaze and saw me watching. Her mouth curved into a small, satisfied smile. She whispered something in the man's ear, and he nodded, glancing at me again. They were making a show of it, I realized. This wasn't grief, it was performance. How long had this been going on? How long had my father known? I left without speaking to anyone. Back in my office, I couldn't concentrate. I kept seeing that man's face, the way he'd held Margaret, the way he'd looked at me with something like recognition. "Sarah," I called through the intercom, "I need you to find out everything you can about my stepmother's recent activities, who she's been seeing, where she's been living, anything you can dig up." "Of course, Miss Chen. Should I use the usual channels?" "Yes. And Sarah, I need this by tomorrow." She was good at her job. By the next morning, I had a complete file on Margaret's life since my father's death. And what I found made my blood boil. She had been living with Richard Blackwood for 6 months. Not in some tiny apartment which she'd claimed, but in his mansion in the hills. Richard Blackwood. I knew that name now. He was a real estate developer, one of the biggest in the city. He also happened to be one of my biggest competitors. But that wasn't the worst part. The worst part was the timeline. Margaret had moved in with Blackwood 2 months before my father died. While my father was alone, sick, and broke, she was already playing house with her new man. My father hadn't just lost his business. He'd lost his wife, too. The file contained more details that painted an even uglier picture. Margaret had been systematically moving money out of their joint accounts for months before she left. Small amounts, nothing that would trigger immediate attention, but enough to leave my father with almost nothing when the business finally collapsed. She hadn't just abandoned him. She had helped destroy him. I sat back in my chair, staring at the photographs of Margaret and Blackwood at various social events, smiling and happy while my father died alone. The rage that filled me was cold and calculating. Margaret thought she had won. She thought she had gotten away with it all. She was about to learn how wrong she was. I spent the next 2 weeks planning. I couldn't just confront them. That would accomplish nothing. Margaret would deny everything, play the victim. I needed something more, something that would hurt her the way she had hurt my father. The answer came from an unexpected source. "Miss Chen?" Sarah knocked and entered with a worried expression. "I have that additional information you requested about Blackwood Industries." "What did you find?" "They're in trouble, ma'am. Deep trouble. Blackwood has been using risky financial instruments to fund his recent projects. With the market downturn, he's over-leveraged and running out of cash fast." I took the report from her hands, scanning the numbers. Blackwood's empire was built on debt and speculation. One big push in the right direction, and the whole thing would collapse. "There's more," Sarah continued. "He's been trying to secure emergency funding, but the banks are getting nervous. He needs a major deal to close in the next month, or he'll have to start selling assets." "What kind of deal?" "There's a big municipal contract coming up. The city wants to redevelop the old industrial district. It's worth $200 million over 5 years. Whoever gets it will have enough cash flow to weather any storm." I smiled. "And I suppose we're bidding on that same contract?" "Yes, ma'am. Though Blackwood has the inside track. He's been cultivating the city council for years. Not for much longer. I closed the file. Sarah, I want you to schedule a meeting with my legal team and get me everything we have on that municipal contract. Every detail. Right away. As she left, I leaned back in my chair. Margaret thought she had traded up, leaving my broken father for a successful businessman. Soon, she'd discover that her new man was about to lose everything, and I was going to be the one holding the sledgehammer. But first, I had to make sure Blackwood knew exactly who was destroying him. The opportunity came sooner than I expected. The city was hosting a charity gala for the mayor's re-election campaign. All the major developers would be there, schmoozing and making deals, including Blackwood. I bought a table and invited my most important clients. We needed to make an impression. The ballroom was elegant, filled with the city's elite. I spotted Blackwood immediately, holding court near the bar. And there, on his arm like a beautiful accessory, was Margaret. She wore a stunning red dress that probably cost more than most people made in a month. Her hair was perfectly styled, her makeup flawless. She looked like she belonged in this world of wealth and power. She had no idea it was all about to come crashing down. I waited until the perfect moment. The mayor had just finished his speech, and people were mingling, making connections. I walked over to Blackwood's group with a champagne glass in my hand and a friendly smile on my face. "Richard Blackwood," I said, extending my hand. "Sophie Chen, I don't think we've been properly introduced." He turned and I saw recognition dawn in his eyes. "Miss Chen, yes, I know your work. Impressive portfolio." "Thank you. I was sorry to hear about your recent challenges." His smile tightened slightly. "Challenges?" "The leveraging situation, the cash flow problems. It must be difficult, trying to maintain this lifestyle while your business is hemorrhaging money." The group around us had gone quiet. Margaret was staring at me with growing alarm. "I'm not sure what you're implying," Blackwood said carefully. "I'm not implying anything. I'm stating facts. Your company is on the verge of bankruptcy. The only thing keeping you afloat is the hope that you'll land the municipal contract. But that's not going to happen." "Sophie," Margaret's voice was sharp. "What are you doing?" I turned to her with a cold smile. "Hello, Margaret. You look well. Grief suits you." Her face went pale. "Richard, this is my stepdaughter, David's girl." "Ah." Blackwood's expression hardened. "I should have known. You have your father's eyes." "Do I? That's interesting. Because according to my stepmother here, my father died a broken man, abandoned by his family, living in poverty." I looked around the group, making sure I had everyone's attention. She failed to mention that she had moved in with you months before he died, or that she had been systematically draining their joint accounts. "That's a lie," Margaret said, but her voice lacked conviction. "Is it? I have bank records, Margaret. I have photographs. I have a complete timeline of your relationship with Mr. Blackwood here." I turned back to him. "Did you know she was still married when you started dating? Or did she tell you her husband was already dead?" Blackwood's face had gone rigid. Around us, people were starting to whisper. "You bitch," Margaret hissed. "No, Margaret, that would be you. You're the one who betrayed her dying husband. You're the one who stole from him and left him to die alone." I took a sip of champagne, enjoying the moment. "But don't worry. You and Richard here will have plenty of time to console each other, especially after his company collapses and he loses everything." "You don't know what you're talking about," Blackwood said. "Don't I? Municipal Contract RFP 2024-17, the Industrial District Redevelopment. $200 million, your last hope." I smiled. "My company submitted our bid this morning. $150 million, 25% under yours." The color drained from his face. "Of course, that's just the beginning. I've also been talking to your creditors. Amazing how interested they become when someone offers to buy their debt at a premium. By my count, I now own about 60% of what you owe." "That's impossible." "Is it? I've had 10 years to build my resources, Richard. 10 years to become very, very good at destroying people who hurt my family." I looked at Margaret. You told me I'd never amount to anything. You were wrong. Margaret grabbed Blackwood's arm. Richard, we need to leave, now. But he was staring at me with something like recognition. Wait, Chen Industries. You're the one who's been buying up all the distressed properties in the warehouse district. Among other things. And the zoning challenges to my current projects. That was me too. His face went white. You've been planning this. For weeks now. Ever since I learned what you and my dear stepmother did to my father. The group around us had grown larger. People were openly staring now, sensing drama. You can't do this, Margaret said desperately. It's not legal. Everything I've done is perfectly legal, Margaret. Unlike what you did to my father. David knew about Richard, she said suddenly. He knew and he didn't care. He was already dying. The lie came so easily to her. But I was ready for it. That's interesting. Because I have his medical records too. His doctor says he was responding well to treatment. He had years left, potentially, until the stress of losing everything destroyed his will to live. Margaret's composure finally cracked. You little whore. You think you're so smart, so successful. But you're nothing. You'll always be nothing. Just like your father. The room had gone completely silent now. Everyone was watching the scene unfold. You're right about one thing, Margaret. I am like my father. Loyal, determined. And I don't forgive people who betray my family. I set down my champagne glass. Enjoy the rest of your evening, both of you. It's going to be one of your last good nights for a very long time. I walked away, leaving them standing there in front of the crowd, exposed and humiliated. The next morning, the story was all over the business pages. Real estate rivalry explodes at charity gala. The details were delicious. Blackwood's financial troubles, his affair with a married woman, the family drama, it was all there, dissected for the city's entertainment. But the real damage was happening behind the scenes. Blackwood's remaining creditors were panicking, calling in loans. His investors were pulling out. The city council, embarrassed by the public scandal, was reconsidering his bid for the municipal contract. By noon, Blackwood Industries had lost 3 major clients. By evening, their stock price had dropped 40%. My phone rang. It was an unknown number, but I recognized the voice immediately. You destroyed us, Margaret said. Her voice was flat, emotionless. No, Margaret, you destroyed yourselves. I just made sure everyone knew about it. Richard's lost everything. The company, the house, his reputation. Good. You really are just like your father, petty and vindictive. If being like my father means standing up to people who hurt my family, then yes, I'm exactly like him. There was a long pause. What do you want, Sophie? Money? An apology? What will it take for you to stop? I want you to understand something, Margaret. My father died alone because of what you did. He died thinking his only daughter had abandoned him, when the truth is that you drove us apart. You stole from him, you lied to him, and you left him when he needed you most. I loved him. No, you used him, just like you're using Blackwood. The difference is, I'm not going to let you get away with it this time. We'll fight this. We'll rebuild. With what money? With what reputation? Richard will be lucky to find a job managing a grocery store after this. And you, well, you'll find out what it's like to be thrown out with nothing. Just like you forced me to do. Sophie, please. Goodbye, Margaret. I hung up and turned back to the contracts on my desk. The municipal deal was as good as mine. Blackwood's empire was crumbling, and there was nothing he could do to stop it. But something felt empty about the victory. I had destroyed them, yes, but my father was still dead. Nothing I did could bring him back or give us the chance to reconcile. 3 weeks later, Sarah brought me the final reports. Blackwood Industries had filed for bankruptcy. The mansion was being foreclosed on. Richard Blackwood himself had suffered what his doctors called a stress-related cardiac event, a heart attack brought on by the collapse of everything he'd worked for. Margaret had moved into a studio apartment across town. She was working at a diner, serving coffee and pie to truckers and construction workers. The woman who had once lived in luxury was now scraping by just like she'd claimed my father had been doing. "There's something else, ma'am," Sarah said hesitantly. "I found this in the research files. I think you should see it." She handed me a letter yellowed with age. The return address made my heart stop. It was from my father, addressed to me at my office, postmarked 3 years ago. My hands shook as I opened it. "Sophie, I know you probably don't want to hear from me, but I need to tell you something. Margaret is leaving me. The business is failing, and I'm sick. And she's found someone else, someone with money. I want you to know that I never stopped loving you. I never stopped being proud of you. Margaret told me you hated me, that you never wanted to see me again, but I hoped that wasn't true. I hoped that someday we could talk, could fix what went wrong between us. I know I made mistakes. I should have stood up for you more. I should have seen what she was doing to our family. But I was scared of being alone, and she made me feel needed. If you get this letter, if you can find it in your heart to forgive a foolish old man, please call me. I miss my daughter. Love, Dad." The letter was dated 6 months before he died. I checked the envelope again. It had never been delivered. Someone had intercepted it, kept it from reaching me. "Where did you find this?" "In Margaret's personal effects. One of her former neighbors found it when she moved out. She thought you might want it." I sank into my chair, reading the letter again. My father had tried to reach out. He had wanted to reconcile. All this time, I thought he had rejected me completely, but he had been trying to find me. And Margaret had made sure I never knew. The rage I felt now was different from before. This wasn't about business or revenge anymore. This was about stolen time, lost chances, a relationship destroyed by someone's selfish manipulation. I looked at Sarah. "Where's she working?" "The Sunset Diner on Highway 9. "But ma'am, if you're thinking of confronting her—" "I'm not going to confront her. I'm going to offer her a job." Sarah looked confused. "Ma'am?" I was already reaching for my phone, calling my attorney. "I want to buy the Sunset Diner, today, whatever it takes." "I don't understand." Margaret is about to learn what it really means to work for someone she wronged. She's going to spend every day knowing that I control her livelihood, that her survival depends on my mercy. I smiled, but there was no warmth in it. She likes playing games, manipulating people. Let's see how she likes being the pawn instead of the player. The purchase took 2 days. The diner's owner was happy to sell. The place was struggling, and I offered him triple what it was worth. By Friday, I owned Margaret's workplace. I waited until the following Monday to make my appearance. The diner was exactly what I expected. Worn vinyl booths, fluorescent lights, and the smell of grease and coffee. Margaret was behind the counter, pouring coffee for a truck driver. She looked tired, older, her designer clothes replaced by a stained uniform. She saw me the moment I walked in. The coffee pot slipped from her hand, shattering on the floor. "Hello, Margaret." The few customers in the diner looked up, sensing tension. Margaret stared at me, her face white with shock and fear. "What are you doing here?" I sat down at the counter, directly in front of her. "I came to see how you were adjusting to your new life. If you're here to gloat—" "Actually, I'm here to offer you something." I pulled out a business card and placed it on the counter. "Congratulations, you now work for me." She picked up the card with trembling fingers. It had my name on it, and underneath, owner, Sunset Diner. "You bought this place?" "This morning. Which means you now have a choice, Margaret. You can quit and try to find another job with your reputation. Or you can stay and work for the daughter you said would never amount to anything." She was quiet for a long moment, staring at the card. Around us, the diner was silent, except for the hum of the refrigerators. "What do you want from me?" she finally whispered. I reached into my jacket and pulled out my father's letter. Her eyes widened when she saw it. "I want you to read this out loud. Sophie, please, read it. Her hands were shaking as she took the letter. She tried to read quietly, but I stopped her. "Out loud, Margaret. I want everyone to hear." She glanced around at the customers, then back at me. She knew she had no choice. Her voice was barely a whisper as she began to read my father's words. By the time she finished, there were tears in her eyes. The truck driver at the end of the counter was staring at her with disgust. A mother with her young daughter got up and left, throwing money on the table. "He tried to reach me," I said quietly. "He wanted to make things right. But you made sure I never got his letter, didn't you?" She didn't answer. "You stole more than his money, Margaret. You stole his last chance to reconcile with his daughter. You stole our final months together." "I was protecting myself," she said, her voice breaking. "You were protecting your secrets. You knew that if I came back, if my father and I reconciled, I might discover what you were really doing. The affairs, the theft, the lies." I stood up, leaving a 20 on the counter for coffee I hadn't ordered. "You can keep your job, Margaret. You can work here every day, knowing that your survival depends on my generosity. Every paycheck you receive will come from the daughter you tried to destroy. Every customer you serve will be a reminder of how far you've fallen." I walked to the door, then turned back. "Or you can leave town. Start over somewhere else, with nothing, just like you forced me to do. The choice is yours." She chose to stay. Every day for the next 6 months, Margaret worked at the diner. She served coffee and cleaned tables and pretended not to notice when customers whispered about her story, which had become local legend. The woman who had betrayed her dying husband, who had stolen from him and abandoned him for a richer man, now worked for the stepdaughter she had thrown away. I never went back to the diner, but I received reports. She was a model employee, punctual, polite, hardworking. She never complained, never caused problems. She did her job and went home to her studio apartment, living a quiet, small life. Richard Blackwood had recovered from his heart attack, but his world had changed forever. He was working as a project manager for someone else now, a significant step down from owning his own empire. He and Margaret were still together, but their relationship had become strained under the weight of their reduced circumstances. As for me, the municipal contract had been everything I'd hoped for. My company was thriving, expanding into new markets, building the kind of legacy my father had always dreamed of. I should have been satisfied, but I wasn't. The revenge had been perfect, complete, devastating. I had destroyed my enemies and built my own empire on their ruins. But sitting alone in my office, looking at my father's letter, I felt empty. My father was still gone. Nothing I had done to Margaret and Blackwood could change that. All I had accomplished was to become the kind of person who destroyed others, successful, powerful, and completely alone. The irony wasn't lost on me. In seeking to avenge my father, I had become exactly what Margaret had accused me of being: cold, calculating, and vindictive. Maybe that was the real price of revenge. Not just the destruction of your enemies, but the corruption of yourself. 1 year after the gala, I received an unexpected visitor. "Ms. Chen?" Sarah's voice came through the intercom. "There's someone here to see you. She says it's personal. Send her in." The door opened, and Margaret walked into my office. She looked different, smaller, worn down by the year of hard work and reduced circumstances. But there was something else in her eyes, something I hadn't seen before. Resignation, maybe even peace. "Hello, Sophie." "Margaret, I have to say, I'm surprised. I thought you'd learn to avoid me." She sat down in the chair across from my desk without being invited. "I came to give you something." She reached into her purse and pulled out an envelope, old, yellowed, with my name written on it in my father's handwriting. "Another letter?" "The last one. He wrote it the day before he died." She placed it on my desk. "I've been carrying it around for a year, trying to decide what to do with it." I stared at the envelope, afraid to touch it. "Why now?" "Because I finally understand what you did to me. Not the business stuff, not the public humiliation, the real punishment." She leaned back in her chair. "You made me face myself. Every day, working at that diner, I had to look at what I'd become. What I'd done to the people who trusted me. And you were right. I destroyed your father. I destroyed our family. I destroyed myself. She smiled sadly. You could have just ruined me financially and walked away. Instead, you made me live with the consequences of my choices. That was clever. I picked up the letter but didn't open it yet. What do you want, Margaret? I want to tell you something your father said right before he died. He said he was proud of you. He said that throwing you out was the best thing that ever happened to you, because it made you strong enough to survive anything. The words hit me harder than I expected. He also said he hoped you'd never become like me, selfish and cruel and willing to hurt anyone to get what you wanted. She stood up. I think he'd be disappointed. Are you trying to make me feel guilty? No, I'm trying to tell you that you won, completely. You became everything you wanted to be, and I became everything I deserved to be. But winning doesn't mean you have to keep punishing people forever. She walked to the door, then paused. I'm leaving town tomorrow. Richard and I are moving to Portland. He has a job there, nothing fancy, but honest work. I'm going to try to be a better person, Sophie. It's probably too late, but I'm going to try. Why are you telling me this? Because I want you to know that your father's death wasn't for nothing. You learned from it. You became stronger. But don't let it make you into someone he wouldn't recognize. After she left, I sat alone with the final letter. It took me an hour to work up the courage to open it. Sophie, if you're reading this, then I'm gone. And somehow this letter found its way to you. I'm glad. I need you to know that I forgive you for everything. All the fights, all the anger, all the years of silence between us. I understand why you left, and I understand why you stayed away. I failed you as a father, and you had every right to build your own life. But I also need you to forgive me for choosing Margaret over you, for not seeing what she was doing to our family, for being too proud to reach out sooner. I know you're successful now. I've been following your career in the business papers. I'm so proud of who you've become. You are everything I wanted to be but never had the courage to become. Please don't let bitterness consume you the way it consumed me. Don't let anger be the only thing that drives you. Build something beautiful, Sophie. Build something that matters. Build something that would make your old man proud. I love you, sweetheart. I always have. Dad. I read the letter 3 times before the tears came. For the first time since his funeral, I let myself grieve properly. Not just for his death, but for the years we'd lost, the words we'd never said, the relationship that had been poisoned by pride and manipulation. When I was done crying, I called Sarah. I need you to arrange something, I told her. I want to sell the Sunset Diner. Of course, ma'am. To whom? I thought about it for a moment. To the employees. Set up a trust. Help them buy it from me. Make sure they can afford it. That's very generous, ma'am. And Sarah, I want to set up a scholarship fund for kids who are aging out of foster care, kids who don't have families to fall back on. Call it the David Chen Memorial Fund. Right away, I hung up and looked out at the city skyline. My father had been right about one thing. I had become strong enough to survive anything. But survival wasn't the same as living. Margaret was also right. I had won, completely, utterly, definitively. But winning had cost me more than I'd realized. It had cost me the ability to forgive, to move forward, to build something beautiful instead of just tearing things down. It was time to start building. 5 years later, I stood at the dedication ceremony for the David Chen Community Center. It was built on the site of my father's old construction yard, in the industrial district that my company had helped redevelop. The center offered job training, financial counseling, and support for people trying to get back on their feet. It was everything my father had believed in: honest work, second chances, and the idea that everyone deserved dignity. In the crowd, I spotted a familiar face. Margaret was there, older, but healthier looking than when I'd last seen her. She was with a teenage girl who looked like she might be a granddaughter, and they were listening intently to the speeches about giving people hope. Our eyes met across the crowd. She nodded once, a small gesture of acknowledgement. Then she turned away, and I let her go. The revenge had been perfect, but this was better. This was what my father would have wanted. Not the destruction of our enemies, but the creation of something that would help people, something that would last. As I cut the ribbon, I thought about the 18-year-old girl who had been thrown out with nothing but $20 and a backpack. That girl had been angry and hurt and determined to prove everyone wrong. She had succeeded beyond her wildest dreams. The crowd applauded as the ribbon fell away. The David Chen Community Center was officially open, ready to give people the second chances that everyone deserved, even stepdaughters who had been told they'd never amount to anything. Let me know which city you are watching this from and if you liked my story, so that I can keep bringing more stories like this to you. Thank you so much for your support. I'm looking forward to your comments on my story.